Alright, listen. Earlier this year, we got maybe the best adaptation of Superman ever in James Gunn's Superman. After a few long years of the most hit-or-miss superhero movies possible, it was a breath of fresh air, and it got me really excited for the DCU and all of its possibilities. It took a very simple concept from all the way back in the second Superman comic ever and made it something really special. It's sitting pretty at the opposite side of the Sony Spider-Man universe, which is a big burning mess, but I think in theory making movies about supervillains isn't a bad idea. I don't think the Suicide Squad would necessarily qualify for that, but Peacemaker, the Penguin, and Loki proved that it can be done very well. And with Clayface being one of the DCU's opening acts, I'm confident we'll see more villain-centered stories in the future. Superman has some of the best villains in all of comics, so why not take some time to spotlight some of the bigger villains that I think would do great with solo movies, either in the DCU or standalone. Spoilers for the Suicide Squad, Superman, and Peacemaker seasons 1 and 2. The first villain on this list is Silver Banshee. Silver Banshee is prime horror material. The Banshee is a mythological creature from Irish folklore. The Banshee sings a song of mourning, which supposedly coincides or brings with it death. Silver Banshee, aka Siobhan McDougal or Smythe, was cursed by a magical entity, which is what gives her powers. With these basic ideas, we can make a pretty good story. For this film, I'd like to take some inspiration from Robert Eggers' work, especially The Witch and Nosferatu. This Silver Banshee film is a horror movie set in 1800s Ireland during the Great Famine. Crucially, Silver Banshee is not the monster or killer in this film. That honor goes to the silent coach, the harbinger of death in Irish folklore, and a metaphor for the famine in this film. I want to further position that killer as a function of British rule. For the uninitiated, the Irish Potato Famine or the Great Famine is a period in Irish history where Ireland, especially Irish-speaking parts, were subject to hunger and disease while the British rulers made a point of doing nothing because it was beneficial to them. So, when Siobhan uncovers a series of killings in her town, the police don't do much of anything. The police are an extension of the state, as they were when they squashed the Young Ireland Rebellion during the famine, which sought to make Ireland a republic after the French and American revolutions. From there, Siobhan can become a more traditional horror protagonist, in a similar vein to Nightmare on Elm Street, because, you know, she's a scream queen. She's proactive, brave, and a little stupid, but that's just what's necessary to get anything done. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the second act here, as I want it to be largely a standard horror movie. I do want to add a little to the climax. I want Siobhan to get her powers in a final confrontation with this silent coach figure. The mystical nature of the killer facilitates her getting her powers from some weird entity like the original version of her in the comics. This happens only after her family members are killed, as that works with the mythical essence of the Banshee. And of course, no one believes her when she tells the cops about what happened. Only this time, when they find bodies and a girl who looks like this, screaming about some myth, they label her as crazy or a witch or a demon and forcibly emigrate her. Now, this whole movie doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with Silver Banshee as she normally exists in the comics, as far as I'm aware, but I think it would make for a good film. When I look at the more popular villain stories, none of these have much to do with their comic counterparts, so we have a bit of breathing room. That being said, we'll stick closer to the source material for these next few. A character we haven't seen in a while is Bloodsport. Robert Dubois is a Superman villain, and he canonically shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet. His role in the Suicide Squad was great, and his suit update and time in the spotlight did a lot for the character, but I think that there's much more that we can get out of it, especially with Idris Elba in the lead. For this movie, I'd like to take some inspiration from major action films like John Wick, and especially Bob Odenkirk's Nobody. Bloodsport strong-armed Amanda Waller into giving him and the rest of Task Force X their freedom back. If there's one thing we know about the DCU, it's that if you mess with Amanda Waller, you are never safe. Now, Dubois is living a good life with his daughter. He's staying on the straight and narrow, but due to his being an ex-con and the fact that he's known as the guy that almost killed Superman, he's not having great luck with jobs. He takes what he can get, and he's getting by, barely. His relationship with his daughter is better than ever, even if it is far from perfect. It's a hard life, but it's better than being murdered by a giant starfish for Amanda Waller. And then he slips up. Or rather, Waller makes him slip up. Someone threatens his daughter, credibly, so he punches the guy. And that's when a cop shows up and arrests him. Waller rears her head and makes it very clear that he's not getting out of this situation. Everyone in the police station where he's locked up knows that this is the guy that almost killed Superman. While I'm sure that they don't all love that guy, that's enough of an excuse for them to become less than professional. Alternatively, he can work for Waller, track down any loose ends for the Task Force X project, and make sure it doesn't become a problem again. Argus has shown its willingness to rely on assets that have intimate relationships with targets, and this is no different. Do what Waller says, or she'll do what she does. He fights his way out of the police station and goes home, where he finds his daughter has been kidnapped. This is where we get our gearing up segment. Bloodsport's nanotech suit was used up in Corto Maltese, and he didn't bother to get the technology back because he didn't didn't expect to ever use it again. Therefore, he has to go back to basics. Instead of nanotech, he is using teleportation technology to zap weapons to his person and back to his armory. He puts on an old costume and goes after Waller. From there, we can go a little easier on the plot. I think we can have him plan an attack on Argus and carry it out. Maybe his daughter's actually there, maybe not. Maybe she was kidnapped by some human trafficking racket or something. Regardless, I want to go all out on action here. There doesn't have to be a ton of science fiction when it comes to the weapons here, just give him the same type of guns, slingshots, swords, flamethrower, and yo-yo from the Suicide Squad and make him do cool stuff. A decent plot, and that's all we need. Metallo is a really interesting character with some really good opportunities narratively, being an army vet with some major toxic masculinity issues. This positions him in a very interesting and very specific position where he's somewhat similar to Rambo in First Blood. The difference then is that Rambo was a commentary on the Vietnam War, while Metallo would work better for the Middle East. In First Blood, there's a lot of emphasis on the forest and the abandonment associated with the Vietnam vet experience. So what can we do for the Middle East? Well, the first thing I want to slide in here is burn pits. Burn pits are places on a military base where garbage is incinerated. They have been linked with several health issues like insomnia, asthma, cancer, COPD, and many more. John Corbin got sick from these pits and can't get medical treatment due to cuts to medical staff at the VA. So, with not enough money to seek traditional private healthcare, he is easily scooped up by Luthor Corp, which heals his ailments and gives him cybernetic enhancements. Upon getting back to Metropolis, the world looks different. His experience in the Middle East has changed him. The military has instilled certain values in him, has taught him discipline, but that doesn't get you very far in a city like Metropolis. Don't get this confused with Corbin being a good guy. This is a deeply hateful person with big issues. He's extremely racist and sexist and lets this drive his life to some degree, until ultimately he snaps. Increasing paranoia, PTSD, racism, and a feeling of supremacy all drive him to attacking someone randomly in the street. Cops try to take him in, but he refuses to go with them. They try to force him, and that's when he starts to use his powers. He rips himself away from them with enough force to pull the cop holding him over to the ground. His partner shoots out a weapon and shoots at Corbin. He runs away. For the second act of this movie, I want to spend time establishing his powers. Given the fact that this is in Metropolis, it'll naturally be much bigger in scale than First Blood. We're playing a game of escalation now, where the Metropolis Police Department, CIA, and military are hunting Metallo down through the city. I want Metallo to have episodes where he flashes back to his time in the Middle East, the people cowering in their homes as he and his squad marched down the street, armed to the teeth. It keeps him anxious, deranged, and dangerous. I want to use his kryptonite heart as a metaphor for his hatred and nihilism. Kryptonite is Superman's weakness. Superman represents hope, and hatred and nihilism are the enemy of hope and love. This heart is a direct product of society's response to his time in the military, and this effect on him is a product of the parts of him that survived his time in the military, which destroyed his own identity in the pursuit of homogenized facelessness. Metallo still holds on to the ersatz identity he got as part of the military, but it's not a real sense of self, it's power and authority. That's what keeps him going, and that's why he holds on so strongly to his fight against the cops and everyone else trying to pursue him. As his powers grow, and the military is more and more out of their depth, they decide to call in a contractor specializing in non-traditional technology, Luthor Corp. Luthor has, of course, been keeping an eye on Metallo, manipulating the situation to make him as dangerous and volatile as possible. He is, of course, distracting Superman with some other threat. When Luthor is satisfied with the threat level, he frees Superman from his other attack and lets him confront Metallo. Clark tries to talk him down, help him, but obviously Corbin isn't having any of it. They fight for a while, and eventually Metallo opens his chest to use his kryptonite heart. Superman staggers, but ultimately pulls through. Metallo is defeated, and Luthor goes back to planning. This is, in some way, a cautionary tale. Everything that happens here could be prevented. Metallo could have never existed if there were better medical care for veterans and if the military didn't function as it currently does. But nevertheless, this is what happened. Now let's take a look at Superwoman. No, not that one. That one. With Peacemaker Season 2 exploring the multiverse, this is the perfect time to look at Earth 3. We all know that the evil superhero thing is very popular, especially with Superman. We've had our Invincibles and the Boyses, and there was an attempt at doing it with Superman, but I think there's a great opportunity to do this with one of DC's evil Earths. We can either take Earth X, the Nazi Earth we see in Peacemaker, or Earth 3, which is home to the Crime Syndicate. I'd prefer to go with Earth 3. The Crime Syndicate features a bunch of evil versions of major heroes: Owlman, Power Ring, Sea King, and Superwoman are a few of them. Ultraman is usually the Superman equivalent, but given the fact that he was just in Superman 2025, I don't think that'd work out all too well. Superwoman is a bit weird on Earth 3. She's Lois Lane, but also the normal Wonder Woman equivalent, who has been in a relationship with that Earth's Superman, Batman, and Lex Luthor, and doesn't have much more to do. In short, I'm good. Instead, I want to have this version of Superwoman be the evil Superman of this world. In fact, let's change the name to Ultrawoman. There can be a different evil Wonder Woman separate from this. This story should be built around telling the story of this Lois Lane as the ultimate anti-Superman, but also the ultimate anti-Lois Lane. I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but exploring truth and misinformation, Lois's upbringing with the military, eventual interaction with Clark, and how that leads her down a dark path could be really interesting. Maybe take some inspiration from Absolute Superman with how she first encounters Clark. The major difference would be that she doesn't get a chance to get closer to Clark, and he dies, somehow giving her powers, and therefore birthing Ultrawoman. The next Superman villain that I think should get a solo movie is Parasite. Parasite is one of my favorite Superman villains, because I think that there's something so conceptually powerful about a guy that can drain the power and life out of someone. There's really not that many others like it, and it makes so much sense for Superman specifically. There's some obvious parallels to be made from the name itself. I mean, one of the most critically acclaimed movies ever has the same title, so there's limitless potential and a wealth of possibilities in how to approach this. There's multiple parasites. The one that you're probably the most familiar with is Rudy Jones, a janitor for either LexCorp or the Daily Planet, or sometimes Star Labs, that was changed into a monster at LexCorp due to contact with radioactive waste. There's been a few really interesting directions taken with this character before, like the heavy inspiration from John Carpenter's The Thing in Supergirl, and making Parasite a cult leader in Superman and Lois. Where Clayface is all about beauty standards and exploitation in the film industry, I'd like to see Parasite take on an almost satirical approach to the idea that minimum wage workers, immigrants, and people on welfare are parasites taking advantage of the system and do nothing but consume without giving back. Really feed into the whole myth of meritocracy. Rudy, a janitor for Luthor Corp, is someone barely keeping himself and his family above the poverty line. Like many people, he's one emergency away from being dead broke. So obviously, here comes an emergency. While working his usual Luthor Corp beat, he's exposed to a strange substance. Some of it touched his forearm and left a pink mark. Knowing a visit to the doctor would cost a lot of money or even make him unable to work and support his family, he decides to just keep going. So he finishes his shift at Luthor Corp and makes his way to his second job at Star Labs. It's the same work. Again, he works and he works, doing a hard job and getting no thanks and not very good pay for it. This goes on for days, weeks, maybe even months, as the pink rash starts to grow. He gets more and more exhausted. It starts to take a toll on him, and his family starts to feel more and more exhausted too. One day, Rudy collapses at work. He gets rushed to the hospital, and once there, they quickly uncover his rash, which has spread to his entire arm and part of his chest. He's been wearing gloves to hide it. When they find it and touch it, he starts to drain the health from the nurses and doctors. As he drains them, the rash grows until he is entirely pink. From there, he starts to run out of the hospital. He tries not to touch anyone, but inevitably he does bump into people, shove them out of the way, trip over them. When he touches them, he drains their life as well, and he starts to grow. He goes on a rampage, running away from everyone around him as fast as possible. The police attack him, civilians run away scared, but still he keeps touching people on accident or against his will. He tries to run out of the city, but it's a big city, so he doesn't get far, until Superman arrives. As you might imagine, he lashes out at first. It doesn't take long to get desperately aggressive in your own defense when everyone sees you as a big scary monster. So he tries attacking Superman, but Clark refuses to hurt him. He talks to him like a normal human being, and through being calm, kind, and, not a lunatic, he talks Rudy down and diffuses the situation with no casualties. Finally, who could we talk about but Lex Luthor? He's already going to be a main character in Man of Tomorrow in 2027, but I could absolutely see a solo movie or show centered on Lex. You can't waste talent like Nicholas Hoult. Similarly to how much Rick Flag Sr. is popping up, Lex could and should be all over the place. He's a character that can have reach in every part of the world, which gives a big variety of opportunities for solo projects. The biggest thing that interests me that hasn't been touched yet in the DCU is Cadmus Labs. Cadmus is Lex's shady science department, and it's a very natural step. With Sidney Happerson, connections to Argus, and a Lex that's rolling like this, it has to happen soon. To my understanding, Cadmus is mainly associated with Lex in adaptations like Smallville, Young Justice, and Titans. Nevertheless, it's a pretty big deal because of the connection it has with Connor Kent's Superboy. Since 2003, Connor has been a clone of Superman spliced with Lex Luthor's DNA. Effectively, he's their son. For Lex Luthor's solo movie in the DCU, I want to make him a mother. I want to really take time and explore Lex. His obsession with Superman should be at the forefront. I want to interrogate to what degree Lex hates Superman and to what degree he admires him. Obviously, it's a mix. These two overlap to some degree, but Lex doesn't recognize this. He has convinced himself that Superman is antithetical to everything he deems good. To some degree, he even builds his worldview and his ethics around that fact. It has become his beliefs. Creating Kon-El should start to challenge that. We can connect this to the other movies we've talked about so far. Both Metallo and Parasite could be Cadmus projects. Lex manipulates these things, the classism of Parasite's story and the mess of ideology that is Metallo, to attack Superman. These things may not be out of the ordinary for people of his status. In fact, they may have come before his hatred of Superman. But as time goes on, we see it all twist with the express purpose of hatred for Superman. We saw this in the movie with the entire Jarhan Purbaravia situation, and it's a continuing trend. Blurring those lines is what Lex Luthor is all about, so we have to see some more of that soon, and Kon-El is the best way to do that. And that does it for this video. I can't exactly put every Superman villain into one video, so please let me know if you want to see more of these. I can definitely cook up a few extra ones. Are there any other characters rogues galleries who should get solo movies? Let me know in the comments. Until then, I gotta go impregnate my arch nemesis. Now make sure you avoid the SSU with as wide a berth as possible, and have a good one.